Hey guys, this is the video lesson for Chapter 2, Lesson 2, and this lesson is about changing percents to fractions and fractions to percent. So before you move on in your book, the first thing you have to do, especially if you were absent, is make sure you have your foldable filled out. So what you're going to do, just so if we look at it here, this is the cover of your foldable, 2.2 percents and fractions. And when you open it, you have two flaps on the top and on the bottom. The top flap is going to be this box here, percents to fractions, and write these two steps. The bottom flap will be the opposite, changing fractions to percents, and write these two steps. So pause this video and get this copied in your foldable now before you move on, because you need your foldable before you move on. All right, when you have it copied, just hit play again and continue with the video. All right, so we are continuing. So I'm assuming you have your graphic organizer, your foldable copied. Okay, so we are going to start with example 1. And in example 1, it says write 50% as a fraction in simplest form. Now, I bet there's a good chance you might know that 50% is half. I'm sure you learned that in elementary school, but let's show you how these two steps will figure that out. So the first thing, check out the first step. It says write the percent as a fraction over 100. So watch how I do that with 50%. I start by writing 50 over 100. That's step 1. You just put it over 100. Step 2 says reduce the fraction. Now you could reduce in your head or with the calculator. You are allowed to use a calculator. Remember, you need the fraction button, the ABC button. It looks like that to reduce this fraction. So you type in 50 hundredths, hit enter, and it is going to reduce to 1/2. That's it. Now, example 2 will show you one here. Let's go down here. This is more of a word problem. So let me get this set up so you can see it. So in example 2, it says, in a recent survey, 55% of cell phone owners said they text message. What fraction of cell phone owners is this? So basically, if you read this, they're giving us a percent, and it's asking for the fraction. So following the steps, I write 55 over 100. You always write it over 100. Now you just have to reduce. Now again, you can type that in your calculator, but let's pretend you're doing it in your head. Hopefully you notice that both of these divide by 5. And if you divide 55 by 5, you get 11, and 100 divided by 5 is 20. Now if you typed it in your calculator, you'd get 11/20ths anyway. So that's it for the two steps on changing a percent to a fraction. Now here is your job. Your job is to do A, B, and C on your own. So pause the video. Do all 3 of these problems, follow these 2 steps, and then restart the video to see if you're right. Sound good? All right, pause it now, go. Okay, let's see what you got, guys. Now, by the way, as you're doing any of these, if you see a percent, let's say you're like, I know what fraction 75% is without doing these steps, you can go ahead and do it. You don't have to do the steps. But I'm going to pretend that you don't. So step 1 in A is you should have written 75% as 75 over 100. And then if you reduce it, it reduces to 3/4. That's it. In B, you start by writing 90% as 90 over 100. And then it reduces to 9/10. And in C, you start by writing 38 over 100. Now let's pretend you didn't use a calculator on this one. I'm going to reduce this one without a calculator. Both of these, because they're even numbers, divide by 2. And if you do 38 divided by 2, you get 19, and 100 divided by 2 is 50. Okay, so you have 19/50ths. All right, so we're going to move on to the next page. Okay, on this page, we have one more real-world example up here, and I'm going to put your graphic organizer notes there real quick. Okay, there it is. So let's go over example 3, and then you're going to do problem D. So example 3 says, the table shows the percent of each movie type rented during a month. What fraction of the rentals were action movies? So I'm going to find that question. It says, what fraction were action movies? So let's take a look at that table. All right. So when I find action movies, I see it is written as a percent. Action 35%. So when it says what fraction, I've got to change that percent to a fraction. All right, remember the steps. Write 35% as 35 over 100. Again, you could reduce it on your calculator, but I know they both divide by 5, and I get 7/20. 20ths. So 7/20ths of the movies were action movies. All right, are you ready to try one? You are going to try problem D on your own. So do D, pause the video. When you're done, press play and see if you were correct. Go. All right, let's see how you did. So in D it says write the fraction of rentals that were horror movies. So let me find horror movies in the table. I'm going to highlight it just because I feel like using my highlighter. So horror movies is right there at 5%. So now, did you follow the steps? First, you write 5% as 5 over 100. And reduce it, you get 1/20th. So 1/20th is your answer for problem D. That was the fraction that was horror movies. All right. Now we're going to go down to the next section, and in the next section we are going to do the reverse, fractions to percents. So I'm going to get that graphic organizer page up real. All right, so now let's get started on the second section, and this is a section where we are going to be writing fractions as percents. So I have what your notes are for this section, fractions to percents. Now, look at the steps here. The steps say divide the numerator by denominator to get the decimal. You already know how to do this from yesterday, so we're going to change the fraction to a decimal first, and then it says move your decimal twice to the right. So this is where we use deep. So let me show you how this works with example 4, 6/8. So it says write 6/8 as a percent. So the first thing I'm going to do is and you don't have to write all this down, but you're going to do 6 divided by 8. And if you do that, you get 0.75, but that's the decimal. Now remember yesterday I showed you what deep means, and deep is just a reminder. It's a picture that says if you have a decimal, that's what the D is. To change it to a percent, that's what the P is, you go to the right. Now that's because you go from D to P, you go to the right, and the two E's remind you to go 2 times. So watch, if I move this decimal twice to the right, in step 2, that's the same mathematically, by the way, as multiplying it by 100. To multiply a number by 100, you just move the decimal twice to the right, and you get 75%. That's it. Now, let's go down and look at this got it problem. So here's what I want you to do. E says, write the fraction 9/12 as a percent. So I want you to divide it to change it to a decimal, and then use deep to move the decimal twice to the right. Do E on your own and pause the video. When you're done, hit play and see if you are right. Go. All right, let's see what you got. First, did you do 9 divided by 12? If you do, well, guess what? You get 75/100ths again as your decimal. And did you deep it twice to the right and get 75%? That's your answer for that one. All right, now we're going to go on to the next page. Okay, so in example 5, it's going to give you a real-world problem where you might be changing fractions to percents. And this is going to involve basketball because this is something that they do in basketball. So this says Mitch made 12 out of 40 shots during the championship game. What percent of his shots did Mitch make? All right, so first off, when it says Mitch made 12 out of 40, that's the fraction 12/40ths. He made 12/40ths of his shots. So you start by dividing that, 12 divided by 40, and you get the decimal, 0.3. Now in this one, be careful because a lot of people want to say 3%, but that is wrong. Remember, because of deep, you have to move the decimal twice to the right. So I actually have to add a 0 here before I move it twice to the right. And when I move it twice to the right, I get 30%, not 3%. So be very careful. Sometimes you have to add a 0. All right, are you ready to try the last one on your own before I'm done with the video? So your job is to do problem F completely on your own. Pause the video while you do it, and when you're done, hit play to see if you were right and make corrections. Go, pause now. All right, let's see how you did it. It says Elena spelled 19 out of 25 words correctly. I'm going to write that as a fraction. What percent of the words did Elena spell correctly? Well, all you got to do is divide 19 by 25, but that is going to get us our decimal. And if you do that, you are going to get the decimal 0.76. And then move your decimal twice to the right, and you get 76%. She spelled 76% of her words correctly. By the way, that would be a C on her spelling test. Not good enough. All right, so you guys are done with me in the video. if you were absent, you probably have some of these problems down here to be doing. Check your absent sheet to see which ones. If you have any questions, make sure you ask me. Thanks, guys.